Welcome to New England Soccer Journal's The Goal Podcast, the podcast for serious soccer players and their supporters to help further their development and navigate their way throughout their soccer careers. And now, here's your host, Matt Langone.
Hello and welcome into another episode of New England Soccer Journal's The Goal Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Langone. Today I'm joined in studio by New England Soccer Journal writer Matt Doherty. Matt, you're a familiar face here. Thanks for being here again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love coming in here and doing the pods with you.
I think we can just get used to always assuming Matt will be in here, whether he's the guest or co-hosting with me today. However, he is the guest because we're going to be unpacking a lot of information about the club soccer world. And for those who've been paying attention to New England Soccer Journal over the last couple months, Matt has been our club soccer aficionado, and he's actually heading out to the West Coast to cover MLS Next Fest. Big showcase every December for MLS Next programs. All of the New England teams will be there, different age groups. Matt will be out there watching it in the sunny weather. Maybe take a trip out to Joshua Tree. Maybe, enjoy that desert Palm Springs air. So I'm a little jealous if you can't hear it in my voice. But Matt, what are you looking forward to most about getting out west and watching that?
I'm excited to see these clubs play against teams from around the country. Obviously during the fall season, it's all regionalized and you're playing teams in your division. And, it's been great and that you've been able to see the New England clubs go up against one another. But I think getting to see them play against clubs from all over the country and seeing those players and how they stack up against a team from Texas or Florida or California, I think that's what I'm most excited to see and kind of watch them in a different element as to what I've seen them play the last couple of months. So I think that's the number one thing that I'm looking forward to, and it should be good. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is the fourth annual MLS Next Fest, and they're expecting, I believe, over 400 teams at this thing nationwide, and I believe there's a wrinkle this year. I got a press release earlier, but there's going to be some Generation Adidas Cup qualifiers at this, so they're kind of upping the ante with what they usually do there. All of our big boy clubs are going to be there, like we said. In conversations you've had with MLS Next coaches and club directors, what kind of stock do they put in this showcase, and how important is it to kind of set the stage for what they're going to do in the spring and summer?
Yeah, I think it's good for the kids. I think there's no records. It's not like this counts towards your standings or making the playoffs or anything like that. But I think it's good exposure for the kids. It's the first time all fall where everyone can get together in one place and you can have college coaches and you can kind of highlight your players. Like this fall, being at these local matches, it's like there's not a ton of college coaches there. They're also busy with the season and they have games and practices that they have to attend. So this is kind of that first time of the year where everyone coaches can be on the sidelines and watch these players. And so I think that's the most exciting thing for the coaches and for the players too, is that you finally get that exposure, and especially for the 18-year-old kids, right, who are going through that recruiting process, and it's like by the end of this spring they're going to have to commit, and this is kind of their time. So I think it's a crucial weekend for the U19 kids, and then even the U17 kids to get on that map. Like their recruiting process has started, last summer, and most of them aren't committed yet. So this is an opportunity for them to really stand out and get on the radar of a lot of coaches and see them play live. I think that's the most important thing. And it's a cool opportunity. It's a cool thing that MLS Next does to have this, because it really promotes their kids.
Matt, I can tell you're going to get your steps in. So if you have
30 fields,
30 fields, you're going to get your 10,000 steps in. You might even get more than that. I mean, I marvel when I go to these showcases, seeing I get my steps in as well, but seeing these college coaches walking around with their little folding chairs. Yeah. I mean, from one field to the other, they slap the folding chair down, they sit in it for about 20 minutes, watch that game, pick the folding chair up, head to the next field. I mean, it's a wild scene when you got like 20 fields, and I'm assuming these are probably going to be natural grass fields a lot of time. It's crazy when you see these facilities. Is there a team? I mean, this might be a tough answer, but is there a team that you're specifically excited to watch, that you've heard things about, or are there multiple teams that you're excited to watch?
Yeah, there's a lot of teams. I feel like the Revs are the first team. I haven't been able to see them this fall, so I do want to see the Revs play. They only have 2 teams, so they have the U16s and the U19s, and the U19 kids, most of them are committed, but the U16 team is pretty loaded, and they have a lot of high-profile players on that team. So that I want to see them because they do break it up. So like the Revs will play other professional academies, whereas like an NEFC's only playing. They're not playing the LA Galaxy, whereas the Revs are. So that the professional academies have their own grouping where they play each other. So I'm excited to see the Revs. Like the Revs are playing, I think, the Galaxy on Monday, which is going to be pretty cool. Yeah. I know the Galaxy, I'm sure, have these standout players as well. And so I think watching them, NEFC is a team, like I've seen them the most, the 17s and 19s, and I really like their teams. Like they have just good players, and some are headed to college already, and they just play a good brand of soccer. Like I love watching them on offense. They're all just creative, and they can score, and they're a fun team. And so I think watching them play against teams from around the country will be fascinating. Beachside is another team. The U17s lost 1 game all fall, and I know they have high hopes for the spring. So this is kind of a good time for them to kind of come together and build some momentum for the spring. So that's another club that I haven't seen that I'm excited to see. But all of them, like I think it'll be really interesting to see how they compete against teams from around the country.
Yeah, the numbers for MLS Next Fest are staggering. You're looking at like 630 total matches over the course of this event is being held from December 6th to the 11th in California, and you're looking at 630 matches roughly 7,000 players. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. It speaks to just the massive amount of players nationwide who are now playing high-level club soccer, which is great. It's great for the future of the game. It speaks to the amount of clubs that have sprouted up all over the country that are playing this, quote unquote elite brand of soccer. That's how they peg themselves in MLS Next is elite soccer. So, have you had any discussions with coaches, who have done this in prior years about is it something that they kind of circle on their calendar and are excited about? I mean, are a lot of coaches talking about it?
Yeah. I think it's showcasey and it's kind of exhibition-y. Like it's not, I think I
like that word, exhibition-y.
Yeah, because I think they're not like, okay, we have to win these games. Like it's also an opportunity to get everyone in the games. Right. And I think like you're guaranteed 3 games and that's it. So I think that competition level is a little diminished because it's not like you're playing for something. And I've talking to some people, like they understand that and that's okay. Like I think you play the fall and those results count, but these win or lose, it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. I think it's more some personal pride, and also, they're not playing for another 2 months, so it's kind of building some momentum for the spring and having a good showcase. But it's not like, oh, you win your group and you advance to the next round. Like there's none of that. So I think that takes a little bit of the results out of it, but I think it's about the player. It's just a showcase for these players, a chance for them to really like stand out and for them to get noticed. And even talking to like a lot of the 17 kids, right, are starting to contact coaches, but this is like the first time where they actually get to see them play live and play against the best players, and I think that's what makes it very unique. So I think for the coaches, it's more like we want to put our players in the best position to succeed for this tournament.
Yeah, oftentimes what you'll see is like, maybe a goalkeeper might play in one match and another goalkeeper sees time in the next match, or maybe, I know they do. Coaches are cognizant of how many college coaches are there and how they want it. Clubs are kind of judged on the amount of college talent that they produce. So the more kids that they can have seen and the more opportunities they can give to kids, that's great. Matt's been doing a lot of great content for us at soccerjournal.com with, teams and players that have stood out so far, in the fall portion of the schedule. You wrote one the other day about some players who have impressed you in the eearly part. Just touch on that and just, some of these players and what they've kind of brought to the table.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's been some standout players who are committed, like a couple, like this kid, John Pottle on Seacoast has been top notch. He's going to NC State. Like the Bolts have a couple kids. This kid, Ian Hecker, is going to Duke, and Wasserman, their center back's going to BC. And, so I think those players, but even like the Bolts U17 team, like we've done a lot of Logan Monez, who was just the MLS Next Player of the Month for November. and he's a kid who will play in the we'll get to that after too, but there's an All-Star game, which will be cool to watch too. But seeing him go up against this type of competition, and the Bolts have a couple other kids on that U17 team who are really good. And then you look at the Revs, like Judah Sakari as like a standout striker for them, Brandon Velez from Concord, like those two kids have been turning heads all fall, and now you get to see them against the Galaxy. Like, I think that aspect of it is really exciting to me. So yeah, I feel like it took, like, I've been doing this for 2 months now, so I know the players and I know who to look out for now, and now seeing them on this stage is just going to be a really exciting thing. And the other thing, like, this covering the preps, but some of the kids were playing for the prep schools in the fall, and they don't play MLS Next, and like IFA has a lot of kids who played prep high school, and that last match I went to against NEFC was like their first game back in action with IFA. So like I know their U17 team is like, we're going to be really good in the spring because we got all these kids back, and this is the first time where they're all going to be together now that NEPSAC is over. And like, that's, I know, talking to, I feel like this is a big weekend for them because, hey, we have our full team for the first time. We're kind of on the bubble for flex right now, so like these 3 games are going to be good to gel and then hit the ground running when the spring season resumes and win enough games so you get into flex.
You've covered a ton of high school soccer in your time. Just kind of like describe the difference of just the tempo of the game in MLS Next and just the way the game is played. I mean, this is not to poo-poo high school soccer. There's great players who play high school soccer all over Massachusetts, all over New Hampshire, all over Connecticut, all over New England. But MLS Next, I mean, these are serious year-round high-level soccer players with legit college aspirations. So what is kind of the tempo of these matches? Yeah,
it's just faster and it's more physical. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you have some of these kids, and it's like this kid Masood Ramich on NEFC U17. Like, I've seen him a couple times. Like, he's one of the better players in the region, and it's like 6'3". He's built like, it's just like the first match I went to, I wrote this the other day, but he like had the ball at the top of the box and like made a move, and it was like, I've never seen a high school kid do that live, like at covering MIA. Just like the burst and the explosiveness, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like, but they're also very technically sound, and they train on this year round, so it helps. But it's just a level up, and that's not like, I went to MIA games last week, and it was so much fun, and like, it was like, wow, these kids are really good, and they're so skilled. It's just like that next notch, and it's subtle, but it's there, and I think the speed too. It's a much faster game. The processing's quicker, and there's just some advanced decision making that you don't see at the high school level, where like an anticipation ball or setting things up. Like, that kid John Pottle is so good at just, he kind of like controls the game from the midfield, where it's like, oh, he's making that pass that like you don't really see, or like he's one play ahead. They're intelligent players too, and I think that's been a really cool thing to watch. So it's all the things that you would expect. It's just a little bit up the dial, I would say.
We're here in New England where, winter time is a little tough to play soccer because the weather's unpredictable. So this showcase kind of serves as maybe the last measuring stick, I guess, of this calendar year, and kind of will, provide momentum for teams going forward as the calendar turns to 2025. So how, after this showcase, what's kind of the schedule, do you think, for a lot of these club teams? I mean, what do they, is it kind of decompress time after this before they reset things after the holidays? And does that make, does that heighten the importance of what they do in this showcase?
So they do get a little time off around Christmas and New Year's, and then I think they get like 2-3 weeks off, which is, I mean, they've been going since September.
Right.
Like, if games start right after Labor Day, and then they practice 4 days a week and play both weekend days. So it's been a grind the last couple of months, especially for the directors and the coaches, and obviously the players going to school as well. So they do get that time off around the holidays, and then, but I think they start training right back up in January. But up here, like the MLS next season will resume in February. I think there's some games like late February will be cold, hopefully. And then like March, April, May is kind of when the season wraps up. So March and April are big months as well. But yeah, there'll be a little downtime. So right, yeah, you do want to end like the year on a good note, and you want to, especially I think like it doesn't matter if they win or lose. Obviously, you want the competitor and
Sure.
you wants to win, but it's not like, oh, this is going to hurt us in the standings, or we're not going to qualify for the playoffs now because we went 0-3 in California. But there is probably like right, you beat a team like the Rebs beat the LA Galaxy. I'm sure that like. You think about that for the next couple of months, and then when you return to play, that. Or a team like IFA, who like is finally whole for the first time, it's like, wow, we went 3-0 at Fest. Like that's going to carry some weight heading into the season, and you learn how to play with each other a little bit better, and just kind of get everything to merge, and then take that break, and then you kind of hit the ground running. So I think that's important. Yeah.
In terms of our content that we'll have kind of in the aftermath of this, take us through kind of what our readers can expect to see on the club circuit after this. I mean, we know you're gonna be soaking in as much information as you can out there in California, and talking to as many people as you can, and seeing as many players as you can. But what are you thinking as we get going further into winter? What you hope to gain from this and provide to our readers?
Yeah, I think I've highlighted a lot of these players too, but kind of going deeper, and there'll be some new players from the private schools, but also seeing them compete at this level. I think, I'll notice some new things and some new players as well. So really just kind of highlighting players from each age group, from each position, I think is the big thing, where it's like, okay, like here are 5 to 10 defenders from the class of 2025 who are uncommitted, who did well. And I'll be seeing all the New England clubs, and they'll all be in one place. So kind of doing that per each position, per each class, I think will be big, and kind of give us, it kind of wraps up everything from the fall, right? It's like these are the 8 defenders who had a good fall season and also really stood out at this big showcase in front of college coaches, and letting our readers know who they are and what they did well. So I think like right, you got the midfielders, you got the defense, you got the forward for 25 and 26. That'll be big. I think there'll be an overarching standout thing of players who scored goals or played well from all over the age groups as well that I want to hit on. And then we have the 2 all-star games, and I think that's a fascinating part of it too. On Sunday, there's the U17 and the U19.
Have those teams been picked already?
They've been picked,
they do?
yeah. So the New England clubs have a couple players from each club who are going to be competing in that. I think there's 22 players on each team, so they each play a half. And that's like, I'll definitely do something from that, some takeaways from that game. And then also trying to talk to some coaches. Like there hasn't been college coaches at much of the matches that I've been to so far. So, talking to them and learning like what they're looking for and who they're looking at. I think that'll be important too. So there's definitely gonna be a ton of content that, will drive us through December and January, and a lot of takeaway stuff from what I see.
Yeah, for sure. And be interesting.
Goalies. I want to do some goalie stuff.
Yeah. Keepers are kind of the sometimes get a little forgotten, and that's not on purpose. I mean, because they are so valuable to what happens on the field. And hopefully, it's been a bit of a slow drip, I should say, with the recruiting in the class of 2025 and the class of 2026. I think more so on the boys' side. I feel like for whatever reason, the last couple of years. Recruiting on the girls' side, we've seen more commits from New England on the girls' side. We kind of know the reasons. We kind of know it's the transfer portal, and it's the extra year of eligibility that we've seen from COVID-19, which is wrapping up after this year. So I think recruiting should pick up, and I think a showcase like this will amp things up. And I think I would expect to see after this showcase in California, I would expect to see a lot of players who are uncommitted become committed.
Start happening, right? So I think that'll give me a good baseline of who to look out for, and kind of some stock up people too, like who raised your stock out there, and I think we'll see that effect come out too, where it's like someone has a good fest, and then in January they're committing, and so that whole process is going to be cool to watch. And this is kind of my first go around, obviously, with everything, and the fall was great, but I think this is a nice break in the action, and it's gonna it's going to be good for all parties involved.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm excited.
You're gonna have fun out there. You're gonna have fun. That's a nice venue. You're not going to Siberia here. You're going to going to California.
No respect to Canada.
But by all means, stop by soccerjournal.com in the coming weeks, the coming months. Matt Doherty's club soccer coverage will be there, as well as all of our other content that we're doing. You know, the college soccer season's wrapping up, the prep school and the MIA and the high school season is already wrapped up. Club will be ramping up, so Matt's stuff will be great. So check here our website for that, soccerjournal.com.
Are you serious about playing your sport in college? Do you need a flexible education that allows you to maintain your practice and competition schedules while also preparing you to succeed at the next level? You should check out the University of Nebraska High School. UNHS is accredited and offers more than 100 online courses, including NCAA-approved courses to protect your academic eligibility. Students can earn a UNHS diploma or take a single course for transfer credit. Courses are college prep, self-paced, and available 24/7, 365. Enroll anytime and take up to a year to complete a course. Visit highschool.nebraska.edu today.
Before we wrap things up here, we'll turn things to extra time with producer David Yaz. 3 random questions from the world of soccer. We have no idea what they are. Only David knows, and here he goes.
It's the end of regulation, so let's move to extra time.
Yes, pay no attention to that mysterious producer behind the curtain who has all the answers and all these questions. So 3 questions. Unprepared are our panelists, and these will be on the subject of writing about soccer. Amazing that we haven't covered this yet.
Right in our wheelhouse.
We've got 2 journalists right here. So, question number 1, Matt Langone, we'll start with you. What kind of reputation do you want to have in the soccer community as a writer?
I think not just here, but anywhere I've ever been in my journalistic career, which has now spanned, we're looking at like 20 plus years here of being a journalist.
Wow, you're old.
Yeah, or maybe I shouldn't have added that plus. I think it's about 20 years. I'm not that old. I don't know why I said plus.
Right.
I'm not that old.
You're not as old as me. Fine.
But fair and objective. I mean, no gotcha content here. Just the facts. Fair and objective, analytical. We try to call it like we see it, and our job here is to promote the game of soccer within New England and highlight the best teams, players, and personalities we have to offer here, and that's what we're trying to do. But always be fair and always be objective in the process. And when there's news, to report it. That's not always going to be rosy news, but when it needs to be put out there, we're gonna put it out there with our best foot forward and be as objective as we can.
I like that.
Hard to quibble with that. Matt D, do you have something you can add to that?
I think, when I write something, I always want the reader to know, like, okay, he has a pulse on what's going on, like being an expert of the field I'm covering. And, that's about knowing players and coaches and analysis and all those things. So, like, when I write my content, I want people to be like, okay, he knows what's going on. And I want to provide that information to them that, I'm aware and I understand the scene that I'm covering and presenting that in an informative and insightful way. That's my goal each time I do content.
You're absolutely going to get better answers out of people if they immediately think, oh, well, at least this guy knows what he's talking about. I mean, very true, right? I mean, and,
true.
And
there's just a level to it, like, not just the basic knowledge,
And also, I take it, be upfront about what you don't know. Right.
Of course.
Because I remember when I started as a journalist in 1995. I mean, I was kind of new to the scene, and my big line was, "Listen, I have no idea how this works. Can you help me out here?" Sometimes that works,
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point, David. I think knowing what you don't know is sometimes more valuable, because in this industry sometimes you can get caught up with I'm the smartest guy in the room, and you're not on certain things, and you should know what you don't know.
Yeah. No, I didn't even mean to sound too cocky. I'm just being like,
no, you didn't.
And these last 2 months has been all about that, right? Like I came in kind of at square one, and I feel like I've been helped so much by you guys and by other coaches and people in the club world have helped me, and I feel like I started out here and now I'm up here, and obviously there's more to know. Like I don't know everything, but I think no, that's been key to this job is like finding my footing and finding that groove, and I think this weekend will help too.
All right, question number 2. Matt D, we start with you. In covering sports, what has been your most memorable interview or most memorable person you've met through your position as a writer?
Wow, that's a good question.
That is a good one.
I'm just full of good questions.
Memorable person?
That's what I do. Well, yeah, or interview. I mean, it could be an interview that took an unusual turn. It could be an interview that you just particularly enjoyed.
Yeah. I think there's a couple. I think, like when I was at the Globe, I got to meet Dan Shaughnessy as a college student, and he was someone who, you know, I read growing up in the paper, and I would love the Sunday columns that he would do. And I remember we actually had Pat Connaughton in, who's you know, plays in the NBA, went to St. John's Prep, and I had to go greet him and bring him up, and I was like 19, 20, and Dan Shaughnessy was speaking at this, it was like a scholar athlete event, so I had like Pat Connaughton and Dan Shaughnessy, and I'm just like this little scrub, like, you know, just came from my dorm room and wide-eyed, and that was pretty cool.
And how did Shaughnessy, what was your impression of Shaughnessy?
He was awesome. He's been really nice to me every time he follows the high school sports scene a lot, so I see him at games sometimes. Back, like I was covering Newton North basketball a lot, and he would go to those games, and he'd have the Wall Street Journal reading it before the game at a high school event. So he's been good for high school sports. Like he keeps up with everything. So that was cool because he's someone who I've always idolized growing up.
I when I got out of law school, I was kind of undergoing had a little bit of a career crisis, or wondering whether I truly wanted to be a lawyer or not. Started poking around, and I thought, what the hell? I've always wanted to be a writer. I know I've got this law degree. It kind of doesn't make sense. But I wrote a letter to Dan Shaughnessy, and I said, Dan, I think I'm a writer trapped in the body of a lawyer, and just any advice you might have, you're one of the writers I really admire. And within a day or two, the phone rang. It's like, hey, Dave, it's Dan Shaughnessy from the Globe. I was like, what?
That's awesome.
He was super
awesome,
nice.
yeah.
He was not encouraging because, you know, the landscape of sports journalism is very, at least at the time, and probably still, is very competitive. And it's kind of hard to break into.
Right.
Yeah.
But a few days later, or a month later or so, I got a job writing for Lawyers Weekly, which made a lot more sense. Anyway.
It's a great story.
Thank you. Yeah, no, but for a guy that can be very dour in it and sometimes even negative in his columns, he's a wonderful writer.
Oh, tremendous.
I learned a lot about just little techniques he put in.
Tremendous.
And a super nice guy. Matt Langone, your thoughts?
So what always comes to mind whenever I've had a distinction of being in a Celtics locker room after they won an NBA championship and being in a Red Sox clubhouse after they won a World Series. I covered the 2008 NBA Finals, and I covered the 2013 World Series. So I was in both when they won. And I was a young reporter in 2008 covering the team back when I was working for the Eagle Tribune, that sister of papers. And I was covering it, and my assignment was to interview Eddie House after they. You guys remember Eddie House? He still works. You know, he still does. He still is an analyst for the team.
Big time green team.
Yeah, he was kind of a bench player, spark plug, great shooter. Obviously, played a big part in that 2008 championship. And I was to interview him, and in the locker room after is just obviously, as you can think, is chaos. I mean, champagne everywhere, and everything. And I'm trying to stick a microphone in front of Eddie House's face to interview him, and somebody, I don't even know who the player was, is just dumping champagne on my head and dumping champagne on Eddie House's head. I mean, he was the intended target. They don't give a crap about me. I'm just there as kind of the, whatever. But I got champagne on my head. I'm trying to interview Eddie House. I'm screaming because nobody can hear anything. Music's blaring. And I still tell that story all the time. Like, I tell it to my kids, Eddie House on TV. Like, I interviewed him, and after they won the championship, I got champagne on my head.
That's really cool.
And my kids aren't impressed at all. They don't give a crap.
Did the champagne sting your eyes?
It mainly hit the top of my head and ran down my back. So I avoided. I didn't have to. Everyone else, the players all have their goggles on and stuff.
Yeah, that was a phenomenon that was new to kind of that era. Approximately, that you started seeing them wear ski goggles during the champagne celebrations. So I just conclude that the champagne must really sting.
It does.
In order for them to actually bother to go out.
And that's a great point. This was kind of pre-goggle era. Like players weren't. I mean, some of them had them on, but now you see the video of locker rooms and everyone's got goggles. It's like they hand them out. Yeah, they probably have a business partnership with some goggle company.
Yeah.
All these leagues, but this is kind of pre-goggles, and it was just funny. I mean, it was like I haven't covered a championship since then, but I wonder if it's changed because that was just chaos. I mean, all the reporters just filtered in. And the Celtics locker room wasn't all that big, and you had a lot of bodies in there, and music playing.
Cool,
it was fun.
Really
it was fun.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. Final question for extra time. Matt Langone, we start with you. Simple question. What has been your proudest moment as a writer? And I'm mainly referring to something that you've written, a particularly memorable piece.
Yeah, actually, the best thing I think I've ever written, and actually, there was one time, like my friends are all kind of bored about my career at this point. But this was when COVID started in 2020. It was March of 2020, and I was working at the Lowell Sun, and obviously no sports were happening. So the editor at the paper was like, "All right, guys, sports section, you better get creative because nothing's happening."
Yeah.
So I went out into the driveway and played my then. How old was he at that point? He was 8 years old maybe at that point. I played my 8-year-old son in a 1-on-1 game in the driveway on a lowered hoop. We lowered the hoop to about 8.5 feet, and we played 1-on-1, and he quote unquote beat me in the game. And I wrote a game story of our 1-on-1 game in the driveway, and it went over, like when I wrote it, I was like, no one's really going to give a crap about this, but I'm going to take a stab at it and just write about this father-son 1-on-1 game. And it was like, I never got more feedback from anything I wrote than that. People were emailing me the next day. My boss emailed me. My friends were like, "That's the best thing you've ever written." I'm like, "Wow, I don't know if that says more about my career or if you really liked it." But it was just a fun thing to write in a bad time for sports and a bad time for the country, for lack of a better terms. And it was just fun. And I had probably more fun writing that than anything I've ever written.
So
That's awesome.
You'll pardon me, but I have a few reactions to that. First of all, amazing, great idea. I don't know if they still call that enterprise reporting, but it when I was schooled by journalism coaches, enterprise reporting was something where you had to make up the thing on your own. I mean, not make it up. You had to discover some angle that's no one. And one of the best examples of that, it was I thought the aforementioned Dan Shaughnessy. This wasn't supposed to be the Dan Shaughnessy hour, but after the Red Sox won the first World Series in 86 years in 2004. A couple of weeks had gone by. Everything's been written about this team now. Right. Everything's been written about the grandfathers that hung on and saw them win before. All those kind of stories. And Dan Shaughnessy asked a question that no one had asked. What happened to the ball? What happened to the ball? Doug Mankiewicz caught the ball at first base after Keith Folk had flipped it to him for the final out. And it turned into a very interesting story.
Right. I remember that story. It was awesome.
And then it took on a life of its own after that. Right. But just the creativity to think about something that no one else had thought about.
Yeah.
And the piece that I wrote when I used to work for Lawyers Weekly that more people commented on than anything else was a piece I wrote about my mom. And so people love the personal stuff.
That's the thing. I think it was the personal connection. Everyone's played 1-on-1 with their son in the driveway. Everyone's kind of
look that up, Matt.
Everyone's let the son. Well, my son still thinks he beat me that day. He has a copy of that story hanging in his room. I mean, he felt like a celebrity that he was in. There is a great photo. I have my wife take photos of the game, and there is a great photo of me dunking on his head, which was awesome. So we got that photo in there, but I did lose.
Is it in the Lowell Sun?
It's in the Lowell Sun. If you looked it up, Lowell Sun. It was March of 2020. Probably right around St. Patrick's Day, I think, actually. It was a cold day. It was like, I remember I was bundled up playing 1-on-1. It was like 31 degrees outside. But it was, I think you're right, David. I think the personal connection people feel to family stuff like that really hits home.
Absolutely. How about you, Matt?
I have two quick ones.
Yeah,
first it was actually a soccer story. My first year on the soccer beat at the Globe about this high school kid. He went to Mystic Valley, which is like a really small charter school, and he had 125 goals for his career, which is insane. Like, he was scoring his senior year, I think he scored like 40 goals. Jeez. And he was just this unheralded player. Like, no one had ever done a story on him, and he broke all these records, and he's one of the leading scorers in the history of the state. And I did a profile on him, and it came out so well. Like, I was just so proud of it, and it was like the first like longer feature profile story I had ever done, and I just really enjoyed it, and I got great feedback, and the kid ended up, going to play at Bentley. I think he might still be there now. Lucas Drahos is his name, and he was a great kid and from Melrose, and I just loved the way it came out. And the second one was my first front page story at the Globe, which was a pretty cool experience to have, my name on the front of the sports page. And it was about this kid, Josh Baez, who was from Dorchester and won the Gatorade Player of the Year, was committed to Vanderbilt for baseball. And that was like a longer story too. And it was actually during COVID. It was the summer of COVID. So it was like kind of low on content,
Right.
but he had won the Gatorade Player of the Year, and he got drafted by the Cardinals and ended up going, he's in their minor league system now, but just having a front page story was pretty awesome. I didn't have many, but that was one of them.
That's cool.
And that was something that, I'll always remember.
Excellent.
That was my first one.
When I was starting my journalism career, before I formally was hired by a newspaper, the only connection I had in journalism was my friend John worked for the Jewish Advocate. And I wanted to write sports stories, so he let me freelance a couple pieces. So I wrote one about the quarterback, the recently graduated quarterback from Trinity College was a kid named Todd Levine from Stoughton, who happened to be Jewish. The starting point guard for Babson, I think Division III hoops, was this kid Mike Kingsley, who was very good, also happened to be Jewish. Eventually, I ran out of Jewish. I mean, I know it's hard to believe, but I ran out of Jewish.
Couldn't do a thing on Sandy Koufax or something at that point.
Could have, yeah. Well, you could have.
A little past the time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Anyways, thank you guys. Those are great stories. Stories about stories, and thank you for sharing them both. Tremendous job. Back to you, Matt, to wrap things up.
David, those were awesome. And, that's kind of the wheelhouse. We start talking about like journalism stuff, like the famous stories from your career in journalism. That could be its own podcast, honestly. But awesome stuff, David. Thank you, and Matt, thanks for joining the podcast, and best of luck out in the West Coast covering MLS Next. And we're all gonna look forward to your content.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited, and read all online. I'll have a lot of content coming out in the next couple weeks, so. Looking forward to it.
Sounds like a plan. And I'm Matt Langone. Thanks for listening. New England Soccer Journal's The Goal podcast is produced by David Yaz and is a Siemens Media production.
You've been listening to New England Soccer Journal's The Goal podcast. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to our podcast. Or visit anysoccerjournal.com/podcast. Siemens Media. Inspiring. Informative, insightful.